Hey guys, how's it going? Hope you're doing well. My name is Crown, and today I'm going to read you some very interesting stories that I hope that you're gonna love. And now, without further ado, let's go! I have a 10-year-old son. He's a semi-ambulant wheelchair user. He has a medical condition that makes walking difficult, and the older he gets, the more difficult it is. He can walk short distances, 10 to 12 steps, but then it starts to get painful. So he uses a scoot board. Think square skateboard with caster wheels on each corner. He uses it to get around the house and the wheelchair out of the house. He does need his chair, even though he can stand and walk and he is very independent. Nothing is holding him back. He's also very social. He loves talking to his specialists and know all the nurses by name and their pet names. He's also well known in our local area. The employees in the shops all know him. He talks to everyone. Before I start this story, I should add that his wheelchair is not a standard hospital gray wheelchair. It's electric blue, has Pokemon wheel covers, and his rain guards / armrests have stickers of animals on them. The armrests flip up so he has access to the wheels and they look like wings behind his chair. It's very much modified and personalized. Again, it's not a gray stock standard chair. So today we had our monthly pediatrician appointment. We have been seeing the same pediatrician since birth, so he's like a family friend now. A few days ago, luckily at night, during a storm, a tree branch fell onto the building and took out some windows and caused some water damage, and they have been doing some repair work. So his pediatrician's normal office was unusable and they had converted another space to use. But this meant going up 5 steps. Our pediatrician is a late 30s, early 40s chilled out surfer dude with long hair. He came out to the waiting room and told my son about the room change and that he had to tackle some stairs today, or he could have a biggie bag ride. Of course, my son chose a biggie bag, with a giggle. After checking with me that it was okay, he scooped him up and off they went. So I parked his wheelchair out of the way against the wall in the waiting room, and I followed them in. After his appointment, my son was biggie packed out to the waiting room, and our pediatrician popped him on a chair and left to speak with a receptionist. I looked around and his wheelchair was gone. I walked around the corner of the waiting room and there was a child about 8-ish wheeling himself around in it. I know wheelchairs are a fascination to kids, and I really didn't mind that he was having a wheel around in it. I find it helps with education and acceptance of kids with disabilities, and how much harder life is sometimes, even if wheelchairs are fun. I walked over to him and asked him if he had fun wheeling himself around. The child said he had, and I told him it was my son's wheelchair and I needed it back now, so I could take my son home, you know? He jumped straight out of the wheelchair, smiled at me, and I said thanks, and wheeled it towards my son. All was good until the screech happened.
"What are you doing? That is my son's wheelchair. He was riding in that."
"Actually, it's my son's." She cut me off.
"No, it isn't. My son saw it first."
At this point, my son stood up and walked a few steps towards me. He was getting concerned. I say, "This doesn't belong to the practice. I purchased it for my son. It's his."
"No, you didn't. He doesn't even need a wheelchair. He can walk."
And she turns the wheelchair towards her, but I hold onto the handles firmly. I told my son to go and sit back down as I saw this wasn't going to be a quick enough fix for him to keep standing. I tell her, "Please stop yelling at me. This is my son's wheelchair. I have hundreds of photos of him in it on my phone. See?" I opened the Photos app on my phone and showed her photos of him in the chair, and it was a flywheel attached.
"That is a different chair. This doesn't have that thing on the front of it." She pulled the chair towards her.
"That thing is his bicycle hand crank attachment that allows him to go fast on the bike track like the other kids. It attaches here using these attachments." I point to the attachments. If you look at the chair in this picture, it has the Pokemon wheel covers just like this one. See? This is his chair. I pull the chair back towards me.
No, it isn't. Why can't you wait your turn? Give it back.
At this point, the pediatrician comes back from speaking with the receptionist and the entitled mother tries to involve him in the discussion. He ignores her and silently takes the wheelchair from me, walks it around the entitled mother, scoops up my son and settles him in his chair. He turns to the entitled mother and says, "That is OP's son's chair. It belongs to him, not to the practice. You can't have it. And we don't accept stealing, and the welfare of our existing patients is our focus. Your actions today are contrary to acceptable behavior in this practice. We have decided to not accept your family to the practice. Please leave." The entitled mother screamed, shouted at me about how I had cost her an appointment with my lies and how it wasn't fair. Our pediatrician just put both arms out to his sides. Think big stretching arms forming a T-shape with his body, and stood between her and us and repeated for her to leave. There will be no further discussion and she wouldn't be seen today or any other day. She huffed, grabbed her very embarrassed-looking child's hand and left. Our pediatrician was very apologetic, but honestly, he couldn't have done a better job in dealing with this entitled mother. He reached over the counter, grabbed a lollipop and gave it to my son and told me there will be no out-of-pocket payment for us today. I have to just make an appointment for next month. He's an awesome pediatrician and a human being. As the title says, we encountered not one, but two entitled mothers today. We drove the hour and a bit home to our small-ish town and stopped at the supermarket to grab some groceries. My son likes to zoom around the supermarket, getting items and bringing them back to me, before zooming off again for the next thing on a list. He knows all the staff and they all talk to him, direct him to where he needs to find his item, and they talk about their pets with him because he's a huge animal lover. It's a social outing for him. So I usually start at the front of the store and make my way through the aisles, while my zoomer goes and gets random stuff. We were doing our usual thing and he didn't come back. I didn't think much of it because the staff will often steal him away to the bakery for broken biscuits or an extra donut they can't fit into a package. As I rounded the corner of the next aisle, I saw my son at the other end of the aisle, standing while holding onto a shelf, and another child sitting in his wheelchair. From the way he's standing, I can tell my son is in pain. And he's talking to the child and the entitled mother is talking to my son as well. I can see she's getting animated, but from the other end of the aisle. I can I can't hear what they are saying. I hurried up the aisle and took hold of my son from the shelf. He's crying and he tells me that the kid won't get out of his chair and the entitled mother won't make him move. So I say to the child, "Honey, can you hop out of my son's chair? He's in a lot of pain and needs to get back into it." My son has started to shake and I know he's in quite a bit of pain and his legs will soon just give out from under him. So I lowered him to the floor.
No, he won't. He's having a turn. Your bratty kid wouldn't even let him go up and down the aisle more than once before asking for it back. My son has a sore ankle and I'm going to tell the manager we need it more than you.
What? This isn't a hire chair. It's my son's chair.
Don't be ridiculous. I see that chair all the time being used by kids.
You may see the chair in here a lot because my son and I come here a lot for our groceries, but it's his chair.
No, it isn't. It's in the store every time I come in, and different kids are using it.
You are mistaken. It is my son's chair. I have photos of him in it. He needs it back. I open my phone and try and find a picture of my son without the flywheel attachment to avoid the same discussion as the morning.
Nope, we are taking it.
And off she goes, wheeling her son away. My son lets out a full-on wail that is a combination of pain and distress that his wheels are leaving. I run the few steps after her and grab out the chair and firmly say no. You aren't taking my son's chair. The wail in my shouting has employees popping out from aisles and the manager comes quickly from the service desk area. The entitled mother tries to preempt the discussion and yells at the manager, "My son has had the chair long enough and her son has a sore ankle, so he needs it more, and they should buy more higher chairs so that there are more available to shoppers." I was standing back a little from them because once the manager arrived, I knew he would deal with it, and I needed to check on my son down the aisle on the floor crying. I was trying to calm him from a distance by letting him know I wasn't far away, while not letting a $4,500 wheelchair out of my sight. The manager looks at me, looks at her, looks back at me with this look of "what the hell" on his face and asks where my son is. I point and tell him down the aisle on the floor. With a look of horror, he asks if they had tipped him out of his chair. I said I don't know what exactly happened. He was standing holding a shelf when I found him. He turns around and almost roars at this woman to get her son out of a disabled person's wheelchair so we can get him off the floor. It doesn't belong to the store. They don't hire wheelchairs here. The poor child was trying to get out of the chair, and the entitled mother keeps pushing him back down into the chair, telling him that he needs it. The child is nearly in tears and getting very upset. Meanwhile, 2 staff members have found my son and are now sitting on the floor with him, holding his hand and drying his tears. The manager is losing his mind while he's trying to be professional, but I can see he's in disbelief at this woman's stupidity. Then the troops arrive. In the background, I see an employee with 2 police officers in tow. It looked like they were on a break and were grabbing things to eat. The entitled mother turned and was all relieved that the police were there to sort out this manager and started on with her wailing story. The policewoman shushed the entitled mother and spoke with the manager, who explained that my son and I were regular customers. He knew us and this was my son's wheelchair. But the entitled mother insisted it was a hired chair. My son was currently sitting on the floor in the next aisle, and the entitled mother wouldn't let her son get out of his chair and insisted he used it. The male officer walked forward and looked down the aisle at my son and nodded at his partner. The female officer very firmly told the entitled mother to get her child out of my son's chair immediately, or she would arrest her for theft. Her child tried again to get out of the chair and she pushed him back in again. The officer pulled the wheelchair back and asked the child to hop out, and he immediately did. And the entitled mother wailed. The officer then turned the wheelchair around to the male officer, who walked down the aisle with it. I don't know exactly what happened next, as I was getting my son back into his chair and calming him down. The assistant manager took us back to the manager's office, so we had a quiet space. She got my son some water so he could have pain medication, and in about 20 minutes he was fine. He told us that he had stood up and walked 2 steps forward to get something off a higher shelf, and the other child had jumped into his wheelchair and asked if he could ride it up the aisle and back. My son said sure, thinking that this kid would just go up and back and he could get back in. But the entitled mother wouldn't let that happen. He started to cry again, and I told him he was very kind to the little boy and to not let an entitled mother ruin his day. After a while, the manager came into the office and said that the woman had been arrested since she made a scene and was trying to slap the officers, and she was also banned from the store. He said she had been causing trouble in the store for a while with her carryiness, and they were glad to see the back of her. He apologized profusely for what had happened. When we left his office, we found that our shopping was all bagged up and ready for us to go. They had taken my shopping list from the trolley, finished my shopping, checked it out at no charge, and bagged it all up ready for us. When we got home, there were a few extra treats in the bags for my son. I, 59 male, live in a major city in Ontario, Canada. I live in a small subdivision and have 5 neighbors total on my street. For the past few years during the winter, when we're getting a lot of snow or a bad storm, as I'm leaving for my overnight shift at around 8 to 9 p.m., I'll put my wife's windshield wipers up on her car and do a quick walk around to my other 5 neighbors and put their windshield wipers up on their cars. Obviously not if they are outside or something, but if it looks like they are in for the night. Many of them forget to do this, as many of them have children, and it typically slips their mind, and their wipers will be frozen to their car in the morning. It's just something nice I like to do to look out for my neighbors. They are always grateful of this, and they thank me for it. Many of them started doing it too, and there will be nights where I'll forget to put mine and my wife's up, and in the morning, one of the neighbors has done it for us. Anyway, recently one of our neighbors moved in, a new family moved in as of last week. It's a young couple, and their 2 young children. The other night I was leaving for my overnight shift at around 9 p.m. It was snowing really heavily, and we were supposed to be getting almost 30 centimeters of snow, and it was freezing out. So I pull my wife's wiper up and do my usual quick walk around to the other neighbors. I was hesitant when I reached my new neighbor's house, as I've only introduced myself once, but did it anyway. As I was putting the second wiper up on their pickup truck, the husband came charging out of his front door yelling, "Hey, what the heck are you doing to my truck?" I tried to explain to him I was just putting his wipers up to help him. He continued to scream at me to "Get the hell off my property and don't touch my stuff again." The wife then came out and started yelling at me too. I apologized and started walking away. Some of my other neighbors heard the commotion and came outside to see what was happening. They tried explaining to him too that it's just something we do, but both of them weren't having it. Fast forward to this morning, I'm arriving home from the overnight shift, and as I'm walking in, I see the wife of this couple struggling outside to break the ice off the windshield wipers of the truck. Guess she was trying to take her kids to school and the wipers were frozen solid on the car. She sees me and yells over, "Hey there! Do you mind giving me a hand, please?" I looked over to her and yelled back, "No sorry. Thought I was to never touch your stuff again, ma'am." I walked back inside. She yelled back at me, "Wow, jerk!" Told my wife about this and she thinks I should have helped her because she was just trying to get her kids to school. I disagree, as I was just following what they told me.
And now we have reached the end of today's stories. Thank you for watching and see you next time.